Have you guys heard about Fashion File? Fashion File is the leader in pre-owned ultra luxury who buys and sells designer handbags and accessories from over 50 brands, including Louis Vuitton and Hermes, with a 100% authentic guarantee. Or if you're looking to sell, Fashion File will buy your items. They provide upfront quotes so you know how much you're getting paid before you even send them your items, and you're paid the minute it's authenticated. No waiting. They promised the best service always. If you're ready to shop or sell, visit fashionfile.com to get started.
I'm Colleen Wolfe from Thursday Night Football and Good Morning Football Weekend.
And I'm Ricky Hollywood from Around the NFL and The Broadcast.
On our new podcast, Split Ends, Ricky and I will be coming to you every week to talk about all the important and unimportant storylines in the football world.
Join us for the stories on and off the field that matter. And some don't, but we think they're interesting, so we're going to talk about them anyway. We'll break down games, news stories, tweets, interviews, whatever it takes to cover the ins and outs of the NFL world.
We're here to talk you through it.
Just a couple of best friends talking ball.
Listen to Split Ends on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Conversations on life, style, beauty, and relationships. It's the Velvet's Edge podcast with Kelly Henderson.
Hey, y'all. Kelly Bannon here. Another Kelly, not our usual Kelly Henderson, but I am filling in today for Kelly. And I've been on Velvet's Edge. It was a couple years ago. I admire Kelly Henderson so much. I just think she's badass and she is who she is. And I am always inspired by how she is unapologetically herself, has carved out so many places for herself, to be herself. I find that so cool and inspiring. A little bit about me. I am a singer-songwriter here in Nashville, Tennessee. This is my hometown. I host a couple shows for Apple Music Radio, a daily show and a weekly show for them. And so that's a lot of my days are talking to people. And all of that kind of came out of a podcast that I launched maybe 6 years ago or so. It was called This Nashville Life. So I don't get to do as many podcasts now as I did back then. So I'm really thrilled to get to be in this podcast space. And kind of filling in for Kelly. I listened to the episode a few ago that was just like this short kind of episode from Kelly that she was just talking about the need to take time off. And I found that in and of itself just super encouraging and super inspiring. And I wanted to just say, I don't know if Kelly's going to listen to any of our episodes, but while she's gone, but if I was writing a love letter to Kelly right now and you were listening to it, it would just be that this season, because it sounds like it's kind of been a painful one, that this season would be useful, that it would be redemptive in her life. And Kelly knows a little bit about my story. I'm going to share a little bit of it with y'all now, but I have found I have a lot of loss in my story. And I have two siblings, my younger brother, Grant, and my older half brother, Sean, both passed away a little over 10 years ago, tragically, in both drug-related deaths. And out of that, my world was really spinning, and watching my parents suffer through that was really painful. It was painful to also just like go through that as a sister. But what I can say about pain, what I can say about suffering, is that the other side of it, like there will be an other side. And that two, pain and suffering, as much as they suck, are a very, very useful tool for becoming like a better, cooler, nicer person. And I hope that doesn't sound trivial, but I am confident that I would never wish my story on anyone else. I wish it hadn't happened to me. And I bet you feel that way too, maybe if you have loss in your life. But I know in like the depths of my heart that I am a better person because I have, because of the loss in my story, and because I have had suffering, and I can be empathetic with people in a different way. And so all I would say too is the thing that I think is really hard in this culture that we live in now is it's almost like we want the fruit out of order. And when you're in a season that's a crappy, shitty season, like there isn't a shortcut. And it's really hard when people want you to kind of like cheer up, or like even the pandemic. It's like, no, this is hard. So there's going to be fruit, and there's going to be healing on the other side. But when you're in it, or like when you're in a recent loss, if you are recovering from a trauma, that's going to be like, you don't have to rush through your healing. It will take its own time. It is up and down. And I just want to promise you that there is another side. The other side is waiting for you, and there's just no shortcut. But we're going to talk about something today that I think actually, if there is a shortcut, and really that's not what it is, but if there is a path to healing, for me in my life, it's a big part of my story is actually the growth and healing that I found in therapy. And that was for a couple reasons. One, like I said, my brother Grant passed away, and then my older half brother Sean passed away. And in that, my husband and I, our marriage was just coming apart, and we felt such desperation. It was like we didn't know what to do with the feelings that we were having about the loss, and we didn't know what to do with the conflict that we were having in our marriage. And we started going to counseling. We called it counseling back then. It was also it felt very taboo 12 years ago, probably, when that was all happening. I guess 2010, probably, 2009. So that has been a huge part of our story. And out of our own journey in therapy, my husband actually went back to school and became a therapist. So I thought it would actually be kind of interesting today to ask him questions that like our friends ask him a lot, or there's a lot of mystery around the counseling world and what happens between a therapist and a client, and, things that people maybe are afraid to ask, and so we're going to get a little nitty gritty. And I'm going to actually put my husband on the other side of the microphone and ask him about being a therapist. His name is Jeff Grossman. And so now I'm going to welcome Jeff. I interview a lot of people, and I've never interviewed my husband before. I'm kind of nervous. He's already said things that we can't include in the podcast. Okay, so Jeff, I was thinking the way that we could set up this conversation. Do you want to say hi?
Hello.
Do you need me to move your microphone closer to you so you don't have to lean over to talk into it?
No.
Okay, you doing good?
I feel kind of like an artist, though. Like I could sing a little.
You feel like who?
You.
Oh, you think you're me now?
Yeah,
you want to sing us
a little? Are like eating the microphone when they're singing.
Yeah, you want to do a little ditty for us. You want to lay it on us.
I don't actually sing.
I know.
Okay.
So here's what I was thinking. I was thinking we could start with, you're a therapist. You have this kind of interesting, cool job that I think there's a lot of mystery around too. And my thought was we could kind of demystify what it is, what therapy is, what counseling is, what you do in the counseling room. And maybe there's a way that conversation could inform people that are on their own mental health journey. And I think it's just kind of fascinating. I've never really turned the tables on you and talked to you about a lot of this stuff before. So what I was thinking is could you start with just a little background? We don't need the 45-minute version, but what's the couple of minute version of your background in the therapy world? How were you first introduced to therapy in your own life?
Yeah, I don't have a 45-minute version, so I'll just give you the version.
Great.
I would say we got introduced to therapy together. Mm-hmm. At a time when our life in our marriage seemed like it was not working or spiraling out of control. Mm-hmm. And so we started, because we grew up, I think, both with some version of a church background. So we started, I think we kind of both already knew that our families weren't going to be able to help us. They were probably significant causes to a lot of our dysfunction together. So we kind of went to the place that we thought could help us, which was the church. Mm-hmm. And we had some bad experiences.
Some really bad therapy.
Some bad church help.
Sometimes Because in churches, there's like a quote, a pastor who's a counselor, but they are often not actually, they aren't trained like the way that you went back to school, got your master's. Like they often don't have any kind of accreditation for that. They're just like, oh, I'm like a wise person that helps people. Yeah.
Yeah. And we got probably with some that were not very good. And so I think we left those experiences thinking we really do need help. And we found a counselor. And I think we were having difficulty adjusting to what it looks like to give up ourselves for one another in marriage. I would say the loss of your brother was a contributing factor. I would say me working for your crazy dad was a contributing factor. And so we found a counselor and we went some version of weekly.
Yeah.
We actually went for 6 months. I think I quit.
I don't even know if it was that long before you quit.
And then I remember really clearly, he was like, do you want to keep coming? You were like, yes. And he looked at me and was like, do you care if she keeps coming? And I was like, no.
So I'm just going to stop there for a second. That's right, guys. The man who went on to be a therapist
quit after 6 months.
Quit after his first 6 months of marital therapy because, well, I don't know. Why did you just were like, this is stupid. It's not helping. I want out of here. Or what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably it had to do with money because that's a big part of my story. So it was expensive.
It cost a lot.
Cost a lot. And then I think at that time in my life, I think I was like, this guy's not going to help us. I mean, he's giving me what he can. I think I'm done with him. And you were ready. You kept going. And I think that was when, probably 4 or 5 months later, I was realizing like you were changing and growing and I was not. And I think I started to get scared that you would grow past me and leave me. And then I remember I wanted to come back and it was hard to get back in. But we did get back. And then I think we did some version of weekly therapy together for another 3 years, maybe.
Yeah, at least, I think.
4 years. And then as part of that, I started he recommended or kind of made me to get back into therapy.
He's kind of a bossy therapist. He's a great therapist, but he's kind of a bossy therapist.
And so for me to come back, I had to do a group.
Yeah, I think there were contingencies that was like, or stipulations. Like if you're going to return to therapy, I want you to be in a group. What is a group? What's a group? What's group therapy?
Well, I didn't know at the time, but group therapy is just kind of like doing individual or couples therapy, except you're doing it with a bunch of people who you don't know. So it's like, it is what it is, right? It's what it says it is. It's therapy in a group setting. So I did that, and that was what really changed, I think, for me, was the therapy in a group. I think the observational nature of it helped me to learn more about feelings, like the feelings that I probably was having and didn't know I was having by watching other people have them in the setting of the group. So
you're saying like in group for you, not as much as like what you were specifically working on as a member, but you could watch the dynamics of the group and watch other people say like, wow, that makes me feel really sad, when that you were watching people start to use language around their feelings, and that was like your training ground. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I grew up in a family where the feeling was glad.
That was mad. I was going to say maybe mad
anger,
and glad.
Maybe some sad, like maybe. It's mostly just be glad.
Like,
and so it was
be happy.
Yeah, it was helpful for me to like see like, I think my first couple years of therapy was just working with the idea that like, oh, not all of these feelings are bad.
Ooh,
so
yes.
That's a big part of the journey. So anyway, ultimately I was in the car business, which was part of the craziness of our marriage early on.
For sure.
And then your dad decided to sell that dealership that, I was running with him at the time. And then I kind of had this freedom to kind of think about what to do with my life. And the thing that I had probably enjoyed the most was group therapy. So I went back to school to be a group therapist.
And like, if you were to say, what kind of healing or what kind of growth had you seen in yourself that was like, wow, this is helping me, this is meaningful to me? Like, what was meaningful about it? What could you look to in your life and go, my life is better because?
Sure. Yeah, for me, if we go back to my therapy, you're saying. Yeah. So my therapy was pretty tangibly two things. The first one, which was the thing that's near and dear to my heart, is money. And I was aware.
And building a whole life around, like, is there enough? How do we make sure there's enough? Yeah.
And I think what was happening is I was doing group therapy and doing therapy with you. I was becoming not only more accessible to the feelings I was having, but I became significantly more aware of the feelings other people were having. And as I became more aware of that, I became a better leader and manager at work, which then impacted my ability to make money and be successful, which is like up my alley. So I was loving that. And then I think secondly, I was connecting with you differently.
Yeah.
I don't know if that should be the second one, but that was the second one at the time.
Thanks, babe.
And so
I'm glad I'm in there.
I was connecting with you more. And so it was like a win-win, right? I was like better at what I wanted to be good at. And I was connecting with you more, which is
the original reason we went to therapy.
The original reason we were going. So it was like, oh, this is great. And then I was hooked.
I would also just like, if I was just going to pop in, like, I don't know where people are in their lives, but our marriage was in such a bad, hard place at that time. And I don't think that you have to go to counseling or have to have therapy in your life in order to grow or fix your marriage. But for us, when I look back at how bad I think we can both say that without hurting each other's feelings. It's like, wow, there was so much healing, so much growth that was possible. Like, if you're listening and you don't want to give up on your marriage, but it feels hopeless, like there are like, I feel like we're an example of like, it's not hopeless. Like, it can feel really hopeless and it's not. There is always hope. In fact, there was a quote that therapist had. He had like the Latin version of it on a mug, and it was, where there is breath, there is hope. It's like, as long as your heart is still beating and your lungs are still breathing in and out, like, there is hope for change and healing. So you go back to school. We're going to fast forward through that. And you open a practice here in Nashville as kind of a second career in your mid-30s. But like, demystify for us, like, why does therapy work? What is the foundational thing that's happening between those two people in the room, regardless of the style of therapy or the framework? What is happening between two people behind that closed door, or if it's a couple, three people, what's actually happening that makes healing happen?
I don't know that I have the answer to that question, but as I've done, like, I guess to continue some version of, as we've gone on, we no longer do couples counseling, but we do most of our work individually.
You and I?
Yeah.
Yeah, we both see individual therapists as part of our health, our overall health. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I've done that, and as I've read like literature, I would say my work has become the ability to put my thoughts and feelings into words. And my experience is that, and I think literature kind of says that, as people learn to do that for themselves in relationship with other people, they typically live lives that have greater satisfaction. So I would say that is the overarching, that's the overarching work that I'm probably doing with most of my clients, and most of the people who I've experienced being good therapists are helping people put their thoughts and feelings into words. Because most people have kind of like a Western education, they're good at thinking. And so really we're erring more on putting your feelings into words, because that's where often people are deficient. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I would say I'm doing with all of my clients. And then the other thing is just like, I think there's just something to have a place where what is said is confidential. And that there's someone that like holds you with positive regard, like really just cares for you wholly. And I think that those two things, like the work and then finding someone that just like cares for you and about you, I think that is kind of the petri dish of human growth.
That's interesting. So like, people might come to therapy thinking, I want to work on my communication skills. I want to work on my relationship. Like, I want to heal from trauma. I want to deal with my anxiety. But all of those things you're kind of addressing by saying, we can help you know what you're feeling. We can help you articulate what you're feeling so other people around you will know too. And you're also the interpersonal of you to me or me to you in the therapy room is like, we're practicing being in relationship with other people and having like safe friendship and relationship. It's like, you think you're going to like fix my marriage, but really I'm going to like learn how to talk about my heart, learn who I like. For me, a lot of that work early was like, learn what I even think about something. How do I feel about something? Like, who am I in this? What kind of, okay, I feel like there's a lot of like names. It's like counselor, therapist, and there are psychiatrists, there's psychologists, like there are people that like prescribe, like can you like tell us what those roles are?
Sure. Yeah, so if we start at the top with psychiatrist, that's going to be the person who went to medical school. And so psychiatrist is your most kind of like formally trained person, typically doctor, and they are going to be able to prescribe you medication. So that's kind of the top of the food chain. And then what you're looking at is the amount of education or the amount of education, basically. So everyone then that's not a psychiatrist is going to be some version of a therapist. And there are some psychiatrists who also do therapy, not just medication or scripts. But if you just put that aside, psychiatrist equals scripts, then you have psychologist, which is a doctor kind of level training to do psychotherapy. And then you have a LPC or LMFT or LSW, and those are different types of graduate level training that allow you to be a therapist.
And what are you?
I'm an LPC. I'm a licensed professional counselor.
Licensed professional counselor. Okay, so that's like kind of nitty gritty, but I think it's helpful because like I feel like coming out of the Christian world, people didn't want to say therapist, but they would say like counselor. Those names are like synonymous. They're really the same thing.
I would say yes.
Okay. I think one thing that happens a lot in our marriage because people know you're a therapist is we get a lot of requests for referrals. Like friends of ours or my friends will be like, can Jeff recommend a therapist for me? And I was kind of thinking like, you always frame it a certain way. You ask me to go back to them and ask what they're looking for in certain categories. If somebody's like, maybe had a bad experience with therapy and that ended, or they're starting for the first time, what questions should they ask themselves in order to like find a good fit?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you think about, again, going back to like literature and research, like what produces the most positive outcomes in therapy?
I don't know.
Yeah.
What does?
They would say it's actually early on in therapy when you're meeting with someone, it's kind of just this basic, do you like the person and do you think that person can help you with your problem? And so I think that oftentimes is the basic thing of what are you looking for? I'm looking for someone that I'm going to want to spend time and money with and someone who I think can help me. And that across all the different things people do in therapy, intervention wise, most research just boils down to like if the person who's the client likes the therapist and has like a positive kind of transference towards them, that actually is what produces the best results in therapy.
Okay. On top of that, I feel like you usually
want to know if do they want to see a man or a woman? Do they kind of have a general thing that they know they want to work on as kind of an original, what they call a presenting issue? Mm-hmm. So I typically ask those things because somebody who's new or somebody who's starting therapy is most likely going to have a better experience. If they know they want to work with a man, let's refer them to a man. If they know they want to work with a woman, let's refer them to a woman. And if they have like a really specific thing, like I want to work on something traumatic or I have anxiety or I want to do marital counseling, let's send them to someone who specializes in that and will take care of them.
Yeah. Okay. Please correct me because you're the actual expert and I'm just married to an expert. So I think I'm an expert.
With an asterisk.
But the thing that's kind of interesting too about that gender question is it's not just like, oh, I'm a woman, I'm going to feel more comfortable with a woman. Like there actually is really cool stuff that can happen. Like certain wounds or certain relationships that like there can be a source of healing sometimes between like a female client and a male counselor. Like we worked on, with my first counselor, we worked a lot on what was kind of some stuff from like my childhood with my dad. And he was able to sort of be this like figure that helped me heal because he was a man. So like I think there are some really cool things that can happen. Like a certain gender might be the right fit during a certain season of your life. And that might change too.
I would say ultimately you probably want to do therapy with the parental figure that was most problematic in your development. So
okay. Did y'all get that? Let's say that one more time. You want to do therapy with
at some point
with
the parental figure that was the most problematic in your childhood development.
So if my most problematic parental figure was my dad, I would want to do therapy with a man that could help heal that.
Which is what you were
what we were talking about. Yeah.
Yes, which is true.
That's really interesting. Yeah. That makes me think, well, have you done very much therapy?
It is actually, I have not done a lot of therapy with a woman. I think, as gender has evolved over time, you can...
There is more flexibility there too.
In that, but... that's not a hard and fast rule, but probably at some point I do need to find a female therapist. So.
I'll put it on our to-do list. Okay.
Have you guys heard about Fashion File? Fashion File is the leader in pre-owned ultra luxury who buys and sells designer handbags and accessories like watches, jewelry, and shoes. They carry over 50 brands, including Louis Vuitton and Hermes. And yes, it is all fully authentic. In fact, they make authenticity their first priority, with everything going through a rigorous process before being listed. They even have a 100% authentic guarantee, which obviously you guys know we love here on VE. You could also be looking to sell too, right? Fashion File will buy your items. They'll provide upfront quotes so you know exactly how much you're getting paid before you send them your items. And then you're paid the minute it arrives and is authenticated. No waiting, and they promise the best service always. They provide many ways for you to buy and sell ultra luxury to make your experience, well, luxurious. You can try something without commitment, buy using installments, and personal shoppers are available if you have any questions about any items. Ready to shop or sell? Then visit fashionfile.com to get started.
From Disney.
A lot of people want to know about my family. Well, we have a magical house and magic gifts.
What's your gift?
Mirabel didn't get one.
This Thanksgiving.
Casita?
The magic is in danger.
I'm losing my gift.
Disney invites you.
The fate of the family.
To experience the magic.
It's gonna come down to you.
Only in theaters.
I can do this.
Disney's Encanto. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. Only in theaters Thanksgiving.
If I could be you.
And you could be me?
For just 1 hour.
If you could find a way.
To get inside each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Okay, I was gonna just this is stuff people are usually curious about. Like it costs money, right? It costs money. In Nashville, what's a range that good therapists cost?
In Nashville, I would say you're probably right now in the market for a 50-minute counseling session to probably pay somewhere between $100 to $250.
Okay. And one thing that you're really good about and that I'm not good about is you're really comfortable talking about money. But can you just defuse the bomb for people? Therapists expect you to talk about the price of their therapy with you. It's on the table. It's permission granted. If it's too expensive, they expect you to talk to them about it. And it's I like that there's this thing in therapy where it's anything that you need to talk about with your therapist could be therapeutic. Do you remember when you confronted our counselor for starting late? This therapist was starting late consistently, 5 or 6 minutes late. And Jeff, who is like, he's thinking about what every minute actually cost him. And he was like, hey man, like, it really makes me angry or whatever, you know, when we start late, I feel like you're taking like money from me from like what I've set aside to do therapy with you. So I would encourage you, just in my experience, knowing a lot of therapists, being married to you, like, everything's on the table, and like, you can ask questions about the money part. And some people offer a sliding scale. Like, maybe you're going through a hard time and you say to your counselor, I can't pay 100 right now, but maybe I could pay 75 for the next 6 months. Like, you can talk. They maybe can't do that, but like, all of that is kind of on the table, which is so, where there aren't that many relationships where we have literally everything is on the table to talk about.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, yeah, the two things you might mention in there, a lot of people have insurance and they hope that their insurance will pay for their therapy. I think the sad reality is, because insurance reimbursement rates are not that great, most of the people who are pretty good leave the insurance realm and just go to like a private practice type setting. So that sometimes is difficult. And then the other thing is, just if you're going to talk to someone about money, it is better when it's part of the therapy.
Right.
Sometimes people reach out and it's more like they're trying to negotiate before it starts, more like buying a car. And that typically, at least for me, I'm not that engaged or interested in doing that. But
you're happy to talk in the room.
Yeah. Once the session kind of starts and people can like do it relationally, I think that's the more compelling way. Just because, again, you're doing work with someone around their thoughts and feelings about money, which almost everyone has thoughts and feelings about money.
Okay. Are things really confidential? I feel like people are always like wondering, like, if their therapist is actually like, talk to me about the trust, talk to me about what are the exceptions, like, are things really confidential?
Yeah. I mean, every therapist I know, there's some limited exceptions of people who I know that kind of don't keep it, but that's such a small minority. I think most people are pretty committed to keeping someone's client information confidential. I was talking to you about this a little bit last night. Like, you know, like when I think about like what makes someone a good therapist, they're doing their own therapy, and they're typically going to be in some type of a working group where they consult about cases. And so this gets more on the therapy side than probably the client side. But the reality is like most of the things that stick or are hard for a therapist to a client have to do less with the client and more with the therapist, or there's this like strange mix of that. And so you want your therapist to be able to leave a session and then go with his colleagues and in his own therapy to be talking about the things that are happening for them, because that's how therapists get better at doing therapy. So, but
and inside that is still very much confidential, and you're not like,
yeah, you're
Joanna,
doing it with people who are confidential, and then you're limiting like what you're talking about so that it is not person specific. So you're going more to like what the issues are, not, hey, I have this client with brown hair, blue eyes that works for Apple and lives at 3. So you're protecting that person's confidentiality so that no one would identify them, but you're talking about the things that show up in the room that are giving you problems as a therapist, which for me, as I've done it more and more, most of the time when I'm consulting with someone, I have no idea who their client is, because they're pretty good at talking about what's happening while protecting really the confidentiality of the client.
Yeah. What do you think about situations where like a whole friend group kind of like decides a certain therapist is really great and I feel like I've seen that happen a couple of times, and it's like, do you like?
I would say that's bad.
Okay.
Like when I think about if I'm a therapist and suddenly I'm doing therapy with 3 or 4 different people in the same friend group, I think the challenge is that suddenly like friend 1 is in a session talking about friend 3. And so then it becomes really hard because you're giving the same person information and they're trying to do therapy with all the same people. So for myself as a therapist, I'm not going to try to have a bunch of people in the same friend group be my clients. In the instances where I have had people that kind of have a little bit of overlap, I have to talk with my clients about that so that they kind of know, like, the ideal thing for me is I get to create like my own world that revolves around my client based on what they're saying. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard when suddenly that world is being invaded.
Colored by other people's versions too. I mean,
can you do it? Yes. Do I think it's good? It's not good for, I don't like the therapy. It's hard for me to imagine how that's the best therapy for the client, but people do it.
Okay. Let's pivot because you do a lot of individual work. You do some marital work, like couples, but your primary, and we sort of said this earlier, is group therapy, which is kind of an unusual specialty, especially here in Nashville. It's kind of bigger in New York City and places like that. If you were like giving me the elevator pitch on what is awesome about group therapy, what would it be?
Yeah, I probably should get better at this. But for me, I really do think the group ultimately becomes a recreation of the family unit. And so if you think about individual or even often couples therapy, what people are doing is coming in with a problem and kind of telling you about the problem by putting it up on I kind of sometimes say it's like projector therapy. Like we have to kind of hope that the client is an accurate projector. So they're projecting what happened in their life up on the wall. We're looking at it together to try and understand what the feelings are, what's happening, what their thoughts are, and how they would have liked to do it differently, which is a good way to do therapy. But then when you think about group therapy, oftentimes you no longer have to use the projector because the things that people are talking about that are not working for them begin to not work for them in the relationships in the group.
Like, can you give me an example?
Sure. I mean, there's all there is no,
like I'm recreating a pattern of that I have in my personal life. And instead of telling you about it, it's actually happening in real time with my group members.
And oftentimes when you're telling someone about it, you're not able to tell them about it 100% accurately. But when it starts to show up in the group, you have somewhere between 6 to 8 other people who are watching you do it. And so once you've told a couple stories, group members or the therapist might say, does this seem like that thing that you're talking about all the time? And so then it's no longer, do we have to trust you to project it up on the wall? We're seeing you do it. And so it like tastes and smells and looks and sounds differently. And that typically is when people are doing some of their best work because people are talking about what it's like to be with you in this thing that is probably hindering you in relationship with other people.
Okay. Is there anything else that's kind of a group benefit? Cost, maybe?
Yeah, cost. I do think there is the recreation of the family unit. I think there's the vicarious nature of group. Like when you think about individual therapy, it's like you are the center and you have to bring the content. Whereas like when you're in a group, other people will be bringing content and that will both help you process things, but it'll typically wake up things for you in your own life and story that are helpful for your own therapy.
That's cool. That's interesting. You are probably not like the archetype of what most people think of when they're like, oh, I'm going to go see a counselor.
That's very true.
Could you talk about why or what, like maybe where you have found like your place in this space?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm assuming people on here know what the Enneagram is. And so the typical counselor you probably think of is going to probably be a woman in an Enneagram 2.
And tell me what that is.
It's like the helper, somebody that's very like kind, caring. It's like
great listener,
like you'd want to sit with them for hours because they can just listen to all your problems and make you feel better.
Uh-huh.
I'm more the like male confrontational, direct.
Does that mean you're calling out your clients or no? What does that mean really?
I don't think I'm calling out my clients. Sometimes maybe after we've established some rapport and relationship. I would just say like I'm more concise. I'm going to be more efficient with my words. And like people often complain, like I start the session and they start. I just look at them until
you wait until they start talking.
And people often complain like, this is weird or like, this is intense. You know, it's like,
yeah.
But yeah, like I hope most of my clients, they're paying a lot of money to come. It's a time element, and so I want them to get the most of it. And people get the most of it when they have to think, this is what I want to bring to this session and work on relationally, either outside the room or inside the room with me.
Mm-hmm.
I asked what kind of family she wanted. She said, a family like yours.
Learn more about adopting a teen at adoptuskids.org. You can't imagine the reward. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
I mean, you started maybe, I don't know, a couple years ago saying out loud, which kind of surprised me, like you would say you specialize in narcissistic males. Is that still
my
is that your sweet spot?
Still is. So, yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of times when someone is referring a client to me, especially a therapist, in the back of my head, I'm always wondering, like, I wonder if someone in this referral network thinks that this person's narcissistic.
And
just
that's
because, yeah. I mean,
so
when I think about
one of your friends refers you to Jeff, they might be telling you that you're a little bit narcissistic.
Yeah. Friends, not as much. It's really in the therapy community. But yeah, I would say like the things that I do probably the best work with that probably other counselors don't. I work a lot with personality disorders. So that's
like
going to
what?
be functional. I call it functional because personality disorders are on a spectrum. You know, it's not, don't think of it as binary. You're not either narcissistic or not narcissistic. It's like
we're both a little narcissistic, for example.
We both have narcissistic traits, one of us more than others. and then I'm typically, I want to work with the people who are like functional in their personality disorder. So like functional narcissism, functional borderline. And then oftentimes
what's borderline?
It's, you know, like to keep it simple, it's going to be more the female equivalent of kind of the more like traditionally the DSM kind of let the men be narcissistic, which is kind of like grandiose sense of self. And then the female kind of got diagnosed more with borderline, which is this idea of like, I love you, now I hate you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of, I work with a lot of the personality disorders when they show up in couples. And so I work with kind of specialize in working with that. So that's a lot of what I specialize in. It's not all that I work with, but yeah, most people don't advertise that that's their specialty.
If you were to cast like a hope for people, like as a person who's chosen this as your profession, like what is your hope for people listening that maybe are curious or want to get help, or like what cast a vision for them?
Yeah. It does go back, like we were talking about our journey with therapy. And when we were first going to therapy, there weren't a lot of therapists. And it was like
a little taboo.
Yeah, it was like, man, you got to have some real problems.
You guys must have a really broken marriage if you're going
to really be not working if
yeah.
you're in therapy. And so I kind of, and that's been in now, like that was 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the shift has been pretty dramatic.
Yeah.
When I think about, you know, I kind of joke that now if you're like a Belmont sophomore, junior, or you're like especially a college female, oftentimes they talk about who is your therapist. And so, you know, it's swung a lot to where some people use therapy when things are really bad. I kind of just say, like, if you have the resources you can use therapy just as a way to like invest in yourself. And I think that's what it's become really now, more for me and you.
Right. Well, you could go because there is a real serious mental health crisis, or you could go because it's part of how your personal development and how you want to grow as a person.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that would be and you can do either. I think the stigma is significantly less now because of either of those things. And so, and we didn't get to really talk about this. It was like the first question you asked me, but if we go back to like, what are the reasons people come to therapy? It goes to me, most people start therapy with probably similar to the reason I started therapy. Like, I have a problem. I want my problem fixed.
Something isn't working in my life and it's become unmanageable, or it's,
And so those typically you're going to hear kind of like 4 main complaints when someone's starting therapy: anxiety, depression, communication in a relationship, communication patterns, or some type of trauma. And so that typically people are coming with some type of a presenting issue that revolves around some version of one of those 4 things. And it's like, help me because I want this to be different in my life. And so when I think about that, I'm going to call that kind of solution-focused therapy. And
help me problem solve. Help me figure out fix. Yeah.
And I found that I'm typically pretty good at helping people do solution-focused therapy. So like when someone comes to see me, you think about the first session, I kind of say like the first session or 2 is really about this, like, do you like me? Do you think I can help you?
Yeah.
Once people kind of think that is true, I ask them to make a 10-week commitment, 10 to 15 weeks, where they come weekly.
Yeah. You have a lot of boundaries Jeff has a lot of boundaries around like how he does therapy with people, because you believe that's like the most effective way.
And so in that weekly 10 to 15 week gulp, most people with me, I like to think, we're able to help them begin to shift what's happening in their solution-focused dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
And so then typically around that 10 to 15 week time frame, the question becomes, did you get what you wanted? Are you ready to quit? Is that all you wanted? Or do you want to shift to what I would call the heart and soul of therapy, which is what I would say is interpersonal therapy, where suddenly it's less about the problem that you're bringing into the room, and it's more about how you wholly relate to people. And so as they begin to work on how they wholly relate to people, including how they're relating to me, they then begin to work on things that not only change the problem, but help them change a lot of things in their life that are hopefully going to, create greater life satisfaction.
I'm thinking about that. I'm nodding. I'm smiling. I'm like, that's awesome, actually.
It's fun when it works.
It's really fun. It's fun.
It can be terrible when it doesn't, but when it works, it works.
And so how does someone get the most out of therapy?
And that we go back to like what we were talking about is like finding this person that you feel like that you like, you think can help and cares about you. And then you ultimately want to find someone. I think you want to find someone that, like, at the end of the day, you want to be kind of like, that has characteristics that you would say, like, I see this characteristic in this person and I want that characteristic in myself. I think that's a pretty good thing. And then if you can figure it out, you want to find someone that is working on themselves. Someone who is working on themselves and doing their own work is going to be significantly more effective as a therapist than someone who is not. So I would ask about that.
I'm trying to think, is there anything else that you want to share about what you do before? I mean, I know we kind of did like a primer in some ways about like, what is it like to do therapy and what can people expect and how do they find someone? But like, is there anything you want to share just from the therapy couch?
I don't know what else I'm not even sure exactly what I'm just talking to you right now in the living room. I think next you're going to talk to Brenna. So a very different personality than mine. What else would I want to share about therapy?
Or about the profession?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we have stories where I think in our developmental experiences, we were left with some deficiencies. And so as we found people who we could pay to be our therapists, I think they really helped us backfill a lot of those deficiencies, and which made it much easier for me and you to relate to one another and for us to relate to other people. And so for us, we have stories where therapy has really changed our lives.
Dramatically changed our lives.
Yeah. And so, does everyone need to have a therapist? No. But I would say if you have the resources, it is a resource specific business, but if you have the money,
it's an amazing way to invest in your soul.
It really is an amazing investment to have someone that is on a journey with you through life. And so I would recommend it.
I want to get back to being in my community group.
I want to continue having a soccer season.
So I can throw parties again.
So I can go to her parties.
It'd really be nice to dine in instead of getting delivery for a change.
So I can feel safe and protected for myself and my students.
We each have our own reason for why we're getting vaccinated against COVID-19. What will yours be? Visit getvaccineanswers.org for information on the COVID-19 vaccines. It's up to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
I would say too, like, as I reflect on the different kind of therapists that I've had too, it has, like, 10 years ago, I did not have like a core group of friends. And now, like, my 4, 5, 6 female friends that are like my whole world, that are my, truly, truly ride or dies. I'm like, ooh, I bet, like, I had to learn how to do relationship, and I learned how to do that from our therapist. And that is a huge change. Like, someone that, and it is weird because you are exchanging money, right? You don't normally exchange money for a relationship, but like, that person, their whole job is to care for you in that room. And that is something I had to learn to do, was just take that space up and not feel like I would feel a lot of shame about it. It's like, you walk into that room and that 50 minutes or however long, like, it's just all about you and your healing, your growth, and having someone that just cares for you deeply. I mean, I think that's the thing too. It's like, you care deeply for the people you work with. It's not, I mean, you probably have your favorites. I think I'm
and that's something that people
favorite.
will talk about in the room. And you do a good response that I often say to people is, people pay me for my time. They don't pay me for my care. And so it's,
they pay you for your time, but they don't, but your
I
care.
develop my own people I care about and people I don't care about.
Okay.
And so people who I care about, that's more the human part of interpersonal therapy.
You care about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people who I typically don't care about, they don't stay with me in therapy. And so there's this natural, I hope
or like,
those people
there's
go
not chemistry. Yeah.
I hope they go find someone that's more of a fit for them, or where that does get developed. But there is this very natural function of, people are paying me for my time.
Yeah.
No one is going to pay me to care about them. That's not.
But that, and the freedom in that for people is like, your person, if you're in a therapeutic relationship, your counselor does care for you, and it's their, and that's their job. And it's a pretty amazing gig. Would you go back to the car business?
No, probably not. Car business is rough.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. I am going to cast vision for the people that are listening to the sound of my voice right now. We are holding up Kelly Henderson, who is, this is her podcast. This is one of her babies. And she has wisely listened to her spirit, listened to her heart, and taken time off because she was running on fumes. And we all have to take those moments in our life. See them. They're scary. But when you can see them, know what they are, hear their call, and then like take care of yourself in it. So I just want to say, like, it is so awesome. I think Kelly is actually leading this whole tribe by setting a great example of caretaking herself, for stopping, for getting quiet. My vision, my hope for the people that are listening to us today is maybe there is one thing that you can take away into your personal life that you can be curious about, maybe your own journey for therapy. Maybe that is a resource that you could use to make your life better and healthier. And we're just really, really glad that you joined us. I've interviewed a lot of people. I've never interviewed my husband. You're my first therapy interview, Jeff. Would you give me rank me out of 10? How did we do?
You're very good at interviewing.
I am?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Again, my name is Kelly Bannon. I thank you so, so much for joining us today. And we will be coming later in the week. Jeff kind of teased it. This was, of course, the Velvet side of Velvet's Edge. And later this week, the Edge side of the Velvet Edge podcast will be me riffing with truly my BFF, Brenna Perkins, who is one of the sunniest, brightest personalities I know. And boy, does this girl love books about therapy. So we're literally we're just going to be dishing on some of the books that have been really popular kind of in pop culture in the last couple of years that deal either they're fiction and deal with therapy as a concept, or they are nonfiction or memoirs about the therapy world. And so it's gonna be a wild one. If I know Brenna, it's gonna be this is the chill podcast. That's gonna be the wild podcast. And if y'all want to keep up with me, I would be so honored. You can follow me at Kelly Bannon on Twitter. If you want to know more about Jeff and his counseling practice, his practice is called Jeff Grossman Counseling. You can find it on the internet. And if you want to join me for any of my shows on Apple Radio, I would absolutely love that. I have a daily show called The Kelly Bannon Show, which airs at 1 p.m. Central every day. And then on Fridays, that show becomes kind of a headline country conversation, and it's called Today's Country. And I would be so honored if you would join us there. Thank you so much, y'all. It was so good to be with you. Thank you, Jeff. We'll say bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Velvet's Edge podcast with Kelly Henderson, where we believe everyone has a little velvet and a little edge. Subscribe for more conversations on life, style, beauty, and relationships. Search Velvet's Edge wherever you get your podcasts.
Have you guys heard about Fashion File? Fashion File is the leader in pre-owned ultra luxury who buys and sells designer handbags and accessories from over 50 brands, including Louis Vuitton and Hermes, with a 100% authentic guarantee. Or if you're looking to sell, Fashion File will buy your items. They provide upfront quotes so you know how much you're getting paid before you even send them your items, and you're paid the minute it's authenticated. No waiting. They promised the best service always. If you're ready to shop or sell, visit fashionfile.com to get started.
How do airplanes fly? What's in this box? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Learn how to store your gun securely and make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.